Yo, what's up, man? It's your boy, the Dread Mogul, and I'm back with another episode with the Dread Mogul. And I'm here to talk to y'all about credit again. Yes, credit again. Here to talk to y'all about credit. You know what I'm saying? Trying to better your life, better my life, my journey, y'all's journey, with me helping you, with you helping me get to the top, man. This is what we're trying to do on this channel, man. Let's try to get to the top one step at a time. So I got my notes down here, and we're gonna get straight into the video. I don't want to hold y'all up too long, so let's get straight into it, man. What this video we'll be talking about today, is we're gonna talk about a little bit about utilization and closing dates. What utilization is, what closing dates are, how does it affect you, and how you can control your score. Yes, how you can control your score a little bit better. How you can manipulate your score to have it reflect kind of what you want it to reflect, depending on if your situation's right and you know the chips are kind of in your favor. So that's how we're gonna do it. So what is utilization? So I talked a little bit about it in my last video, what utilization was, but I'll recap it. Utilization is pretty much what you have available versus how much you used. So if you have 10,000 credit line, you have a $10,000 credit line and you use 5,000 of that credit line, that's 50% utilization, right? So, and we talked about before, if y'all didn't tune into my other video, we talked about before, you want to stay under that 30%, preferably 10 to 15% is where you want to be with your utilization. So what utilization pretty much is, once again, is that you have what available to you, and what you use is considered utilization. What do you use versus what you have available to you? If that makes sense, let me know in the comment section. Like and comment below, and I'll get back to you if you have any questions also. Now, I don't know, a lot of people aren't familiar with this though, is there's a thing called a closing date. Now, closing date, in my opinion, all this is opinion based. You can do all your homework and all your own research on your own time. But this is kind of, for me, this is what a closing date is. This is has worked for me. This is what I've used. So, you know what I'm saying? Whatever I say, man, take it with a grain of salt. I'm just trying to give some value to you, information that I know. So what a closing date is kind of like, so when you have a credit card or any type of loan or whatever you guys have, typically, not everything is all together. Typically, you have a due date. Especially with credit cards, specifically with credit cards and other lending tools. But you have a due date, and then 3 days later, typically 3 days later, you have a closing date. Now, a lot of people say, oh, pay it off by your due date. If you have $2,000 out, make sure that you pay that $2,000 in full by the due date, right? Wrong. Remember I talked to you about 10 to 15% is where you want your utilization to be. So, I mean, if you want to, you could have a zero utilization, right? But typically, 10 to 50% is where you want to be. Now, the closing date is what reports how much you've used to the credit bureaus. So, if you have a $2,000 line or $2,000 credit card and you've used 1,000 and your due date is the 5th, let's just say it's the 5th, that means your closing date will be the 8th, right? So when your closing date is the 8th, whatever you used, let's just say it's $1,000, whatever you used, it's gonna report that on the closing date to the credit bureaus, not the due date. So if you pay it all off of the due date, on the closing date, it's gonna report that you've used zero of your line of credit. Now, I'll go into the interest and all that in another video, but this is just to talk about the utilization and the closing date and how you can use it to benefit your situation. So the closing date, once again, is the day that they report whatever you have on your balance to the credit bureaus, which is typically 3 days later. You'll see it on your billing statement. If you don't know, you'll see it on your billing statement. When you get your bill in the mail, you'll see it. You'll say your due date's like the 5th, and then it'll say something about a closing date is the 8th. And that closing date is when they report whatever balances you had to the credit bureaus, if that makes sense. So that's what a closing date is. So how does it affect you? So let's talk about how it affects you. So your closing date affects you because, like I said, if you pay off your whole entire credit card by the closing date and you have no balances showing, that means that you're not utilizing any of your credit, right? So you're not utilizing any of your credit and your scores on your report is going to say you're using zero. which is not bad because you made your payments on time, but it could be better, right? So if you show, like, let's say 5%, 10%, 15% that you're using of your credit line, it's going to report that to the credit bureaus, and the credit bureaus are going to look at that and be, okay, he's utilizing his credit line, and then that way your score will boost and it will show that you're using your credit line instead of just not using it at all. And then on top of that, when you're actually using it, and then you pay it off in full before the closing date, and then the closing date, you pay it off in full before the closing date, and the closing date comes and goes, and you have zero utilization, that's not helping you at all. Because at the end of the day, the banks are going to see that the bureaus are going to see that you're just not using your credit, when actually you've really been using it the whole entire month, right? So it's advantageous for you to go ahead and make sure you have at least something reporting to the credit bureaus, at least something, 2%, 3%, 5%, 10%, something reporting to the credit bureaus, so that way, you know what I'm saying, it looks like you're using your credit line, which will help your score. You know, it won't be a huge factor, but over time, it definitely will help. Now, how you can control your score. So, so the way I've been using my score is I've been starting businesses and stuff like that. That's how I've been using my credit card. So right now, when you use a lot of utilization, like I said, it can ding your score by a lot, because your utilization makes up 30% of your credit score, right? So what I do is that I run my credit cards throughout the month, and then I try to make sure that by the time the closing date comes, right? By the time the closing date comes, I have most of it paid down, so I'm manipulating the score, so that way now it's not illegal, you're not illegally doing anything that's outside the box. You're just go ahead and you're just manipulating your score to your advantage, so that way you can have your score staying in a better standing, so that way you can go ahead and get approved for these credit lines and these credit cards and all that stuff. And that's what I do, is that you know, if you have a $2,000 credit card and you use 1,000 of it, that's 50%. Well, by the closing date, which is the 5th, of your due date's the 5th, closing date's the 8th. So go ahead and make sure at least by the 8th, right, that you show you only use $300, $200, right? So that way you can manipulate your score, so your score doesn't move or it goes up, because you're using credit, and on top of that, you're not using high utilization. But little do they know that you've been using it up and down and this, that, and the third, but they don't even know that, because it's what's reporting on that 8th date. So after the 8th, you can go ahead and run it back up to $2,000 if you wanted to on the 9th, and they wouldn't even know it, right? So at the end of the day, the credit bureaus, they work on 30-day cycles. 30 to 40-day cycles. So 40 days so that way they can get back to you. So 30 to 40-day cycles is kind of how the bureaus function, right? So once that date reports on the 8th and the 9th comes, it's going to be another 30 days before they report again and something changes. So you can use that credit card and use what you have to use, but if you make sure by the 8th time, you get that balance down, you can manipulate the score to where it's advantageous into you, to where you're using the credit line, but then you're paying it down by the 8th. So that way it doesn't show you're using a lot of utilization and it doesn't ding your score. So that's kind of segues to my last point, is that that's how you use it to kind of get the loans that you want to get on or approved for, right? So if you know that your utilization is a little too high, make sure you find out when those closing dates are. Pay your credit cards down to those closing dates, right? Or pay whatever utilization you have for those closing dates. So that way, when the closing date comes and goes, your utilization, I would say give it like 3 weeks, maybe to the end of the month, maybe. Because I know, like, if you have it, like for me, if it reports for me on the 7th as my closing date, I started reflecting around the 26th, 27th. So it needs about 3 weeks to kind of, I don't know why it takes so long, but they just take a while. It could be longer for you, it could be less time for you, but typically, you know, it took me about 3 weeks. It didn't take me a whole month for it to reflect. It took about 3 weeks, and then it showed something different. So manipulate that, man, to try to get yourself approved for these loans, approved for these credit lines. Build yourself some credit, build yourself some capital so you can invest in some businesses, so you can invest in whatever you want to do to grow yourself out in 2020, man. You know what I'm saying? Don't be afraid to use other people's money to get you where you want to go. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm doing. I'm building up capital, building up funds, so that way, you know, when I'm ready to pull the trigger, I can pull the trigger. You know what I'm saying? I'm not using it to buy cars, buy this, buy that, buy this. Now, if you want to buy your car, go ahead. It's all, you know, do your thing. But, you know what I'm saying? The credit is there so that way you can utilize it to get yourself ahead onto the next level. But all right, man, this is your boy, the Dread Mogul. And I'm going to have some more videos dropping. Make sure you like and subscribe, man. Share the video and make sure you comment below, man. And I'm going to drop some more videos for y'all. All right, then, y'all. Peace.